these are entitled IVY 2026 Global Dialogues. First thing I want to talk about is IVY 2026. As most of you will know, in December 2023, the United Nations designated 2026 as the International Year of Volunteers for Sustainable Development. Following on from 25 years ago, 2001 was the first international year for volunteering. And the United Nations Volunteers has decided to create the logo and to call it International Volunteer Year, which is why you get IVY. So, and one of the things that IAVE did once the United Nations designated the International Year was that we started to look at a partnership initiative with a few other global volunteering organizations. And they were Forum, UNICEF through Generation Unlimited, IFRC. And IAVE brought these three initial partners together to talk not only about the International Year, but to have a sense of what could the International Year do for volunteering. And not just over 12 months, but for a future. What did we think now we needed to say about the future of volunteering? And some of that was based on the fact that 2001 set out 25 years ago to have a wonderful legacy. And while it did some really, really important things for volunteering and showcasing volunteering and, you know, creating some really good building blocks to support and develop volunteering into the future, it didn't really create, I suppose, the long-lasting momentum that one might have wished for. So we wanted to look at this particular 2026 year and see what we needed to say about it and around it, before it and after it, so that it didn't stand alone, but acted as a catalyst for some of the things that IAVE particularly was interested in taking forward. So what we considered was timely before the International Year was a global dialogue. A global dialogue with the widest range of stakeholders and the widest range of individuals and organizations in asking for their views and comments about what they felt was important for the future of volunteering going forward. What did we need to do to really, really enable volunteering to have real impact? We hear a lot about, for instance, the Sustainable Development Goals requiring volunteers to deliver them. They won't be delivered without volunteers, but we're still hearing from organizations and individuals that volunteering remains unrecognized, in some ways undervalued, and that investment within it does not reach the amount that people really need to see the contribution of volunteers flourish. So what we did was we commissioned a challenge paper that would look at what might a shared future for volunteering look like. What were the current trends affecting volunteering? Who were the key actors and what were their roles? Government, civil society, philanthropic organizations, the corporate sector. And what this question again and again, what does an enabling environment look like? What do we need to create the enabling environment for volunteering that actually enables it to flourish? This paper, this challenge paper, will be available at the end of January. IAVE has now had, this is the third Global Dialogue webinar we've held, and everyone who's been registered for the Global Dialogues to date will receive a copy of the challenge paper. But it will be in the public domain as from the end of January. And what we're saying is the future of volunteering requires a call to action. And the International Year of 2026 provides a really useful moment in time to do that, to have this call for action. That will not only take us through 2026, but take us beyond that to see how we can improve volunteering globally, nationally, regionally, at community level, and to raise its value and to raise investment within it. So what the 4 organizations initially came up with was that what our objective was to build sustainable communities through valuing, strengthening, and investing in volunteering. And that valuing, strengthening, and investing are the 3 key strategic themes that we think are really important to underpin a call to action. And the 3 themes that we took out of that were championing the value of volunteering, enabling volunteering to make a difference, and seeking significant financial investment in volunteering. Now, then we put together some actions underneath that. And I think it's really important for me to say at this moment in time that this is a global dialogue, a consultation, if you will. It's about seeking views on what we are putting on paper, what the challenge paper will be saying, and asking people, does this resonate with you where you are in relation to volunteering? As a volunteer involving organization, can you identify with this? Are we missing something? Is there something else that should be there? Because it's really important that these global dialogues hear the views of thousands of voices and are able to be, and whatever call for action comes out of that, there is a sense of credibility and validity that is based on the consultation process. So we're delighted to welcome you to this webinar, and we ask you to stay with us as we work through the process of the global dialogues. Please don't see this as the last moment in time that you engage with us in relation to this process. We want to hear from you, and we will be also creating a global survey which will go out, and we will be asking you to complete that as well as joining us perhaps for further workshops and webinars in relation to the dialogues. So we're going to now take a quick look through some of the things that we thought were important in relation to these strategic issues. First of all, championing the value of volunteering. I mean, I think it remains about publicly highlighting and celebrating the value of volunteering in all its forms. And what clearly is coming out of the challenge paper is, again, this issue about informal, formal, the whole continuum of volunteering, which takes various shapes and forms across the world. It could be mutual aid and self-help. It could be involvement with a volunteer involving organization. It could be people coming together as a community and volunteering. There are myriad forms of volunteer involvement, and we want to recognize and highlight and celebrate all of those forms. Measuring the contribution of volunteers is one of the ways in which we can communicate the impact of volunteers. And we need to look again and keep a focus on that, how we can tell the story of volunteering that showcases its value and actually then brings in further recognition and investment in volunteering. We also wanted to highlight the need for volunteering organizations to be involved in developing preparedness and response plans. One of the things that we live in a world that is constantly changing and that has many challenges, not least climate change, not least conflict, not least natural disasters, and often it's the volunteers who are the first responders. But it's often that it's not the volunteer involving organizations who are in at the planning. They're not seen as one of the key actors in the planning for preparedness and response plans. So we'd like to see that change if we can. So those are some of the issues that we think underpin championing the value of volunteering. And some of the things that we're talking about in terms of enabling volunteering to make a difference. We're looking at the role of government in creating that enabling environment. Often that's through legislation, policies and frameworks, integrating volunteering into national policies, and engaging volunteering organizations in the process of national strategies, and also investing in volunteering at a national, regional and local level. It's also, we believe, something about ensuring the well-being and protection of volunteers who are first responders, who are working in very difficult circumstances across the world. there is, there is a need that we actually recognize their contribution and that we keep them protected and safeguarded. So safeguarded volunteers is very important in part of that enabling volunteering. Ensuring equality of access to volunteering opportunities. I've already referenced the fact that the challenge paper is again raising this issue of diversity and inclusion and making sure that we have a global volunteering community and that recognizes that those who are outside perhaps of the volunteering ask are brought in, and that everyone has the opportunity to and access to volunteering opportunities. So it's that equality of access that is important. The next slide. IAVE has a real interest in national level volunteering leadership organisations advocating for volunteering and helping other volunteer involving organisations to build their capacity and creative supportive volunteering networks to share knowledge and strengthen the volunteering infrastructure. And IAVE's GNVL membership organisation or network is very much a part of that. So we see that national leadership for volunteering is an important enabler. And volunteer involving organisations front and centre in implementing effective volunteer management practice, including the personal and professional development of volunteers, bringing forward this notion that volunteering has benefits to the individual, that individuals come with expectations, and that volunteer involving organisations need to be need to understand those expectations and see that the experience of volunteering is as important for the volunteer as it is important for the contribution they are making to their community. And then significant financial investment in volunteering. So just recap, we think that the strategic issue of championing the value of volunteering is important. We think that creating that enabling environment for volunteering is important. And we think that significant financial investment in volunteering is also important. So we think that governments have a role in providing funding to support national leadership and networks for volunteering. We think philanthropy, foundations and donors have a role to invest more in capacity building to support and develop volunteering. Often it is the issue that gets funded, whereas what we want to see is a levelling up in that it's not only the issue that gets support, but it's also support for the volunteers who are actually directly involved in responding to the issue. And we're looking at corporate organisations and their role in working in partnership with volunteer involving organisations, and looking at them setting aside a percentage of their CSR budget to support the development of volunteer management for their not-for-profit partner organisations. One idea that has, think might be quite useful. So it's not just a partnership in dealing with the issue, it's a partnership in supporting that volunteer involving organisation to do more for volunteering. So that is me running through quite quickly what we are setting out initially in terms of the global dialogue. And those are some of the issues that we think are important but are a starting point for discussion. And I emphasize again that your views really do matter. And we want to hear, are those the things that are important to you, where you are in terms of volunteering? Are those the things that, are we missing something and it doesn't resonate with you where you are in your country, where you are in terms of involving volunteers? So it's important to hear from you. So I'll take comments now, I think is the best way forward. So I'll go with Undral first and then Janice. And if you could give your name, your country and your organisation and give us your comment. Thank you.
Okay, hi Wendy, good to hear you. Good to see you. And my question, I put it also under the questions and answers. Will this call for action will be provided or disseminated to the national governments in an official format, in official way?
So first of all, the shape of the call to action is not known as yet, because it will be the result of the global dialogues. But it would be the intention that would go to governments and would go to all the key actors. And I understand completely if there is an official document necessary to inform governments, then yes, I think we should be able to provide that so that it is, because we are seeing this as something that would have global resonance, and therefore governments would be a key part of it. And we are looking to have global dialogues with an intergovernmental forum and with, say, the governments that have signed up to the international year 2026, so that they can actually see if they will provide support for the call to action and encourage other governments to support it. And I think that's the direction of travel, Undra.
Okay, thank you very. Just to add one little additional question: will the UN or UNV, or I don't know, from the UN side, will provide kind of make how to say make the how saying in English, make announcement or proclaim to the national governments through their country UN residencies about this, that 2026 is the International Year of Volunteering. So please contact your national governments, whatever decision makers, and inform about them. Raise awareness on that, work on this. Because governments, obviously, they hear the UN offices rather than some local NGOs. Yeah, and
Well,
my
I
name is
mean,
Undra. I'm the chairperson of the network of Mongolian volunteer organizations. I'm sorry I didn't do that at the beginning.
that's okay, Undral. Undral, just to say that the partnership initiative that we have established, that IAVE has helped to establish, does have UNV as an observer on that partnership. And they are aware of the call to action and are aware of looking, to see about their own plans in relation to the international year. Now, as far as I'm aware, they will be doing what they normally do with international years that are associated with volunteering. They will be reaching out to their member states, and they will be encouraging them to do something for the international year. But I think the UNV's plans are at an early stage, and it'll probably be further on this year whenever UNV starts to say exactly what they were doing. But the global partnership that IAVE is part of considered that we would like to hit the ground running, as it were, and start these global dialogues well in advance of 2026. But it's my understanding that United Nations Volunteers is putting out a competition for a logo, and then they will be setting out the rest of their plans as to what they're going to do for 2026. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And now could I have Janice?
Hi there. My name is Janice Malone, and I work for an organisation called Healthcare Improvement Scotland, based in Scotland. So we're part of the National Health Service in Scotland, and my particular role is around the improvement of practice, and volunteering within health and social care, the assurance that volunteering is safe and of high quality, and evidencing the difference that volunteering makes within the health service. And my reflections on the areas that you've identified is that they absolutely resonate with me and with my work in Scotland. We are in the process of going through a volunteering transformation programme, if you like, because actually what we've identified as a result of the pandemic, mainly, where volunteering in our health service was completely decimated and has still not returned to previous levels, is that and is that the decision makers, the very senior leaders of our health service and in government, will always, there's very positive rhetoric around volunteering. Volunteering is a very fantastic thing, and it's great and it's wonderful. But what that doesn't translate to is the required investment in the infrastructure that's needed to support volunteering. And so one of the things that we've been focusing on is building evidence to develop to demonstrate the difference that volunteering makes. And I'm hoping that over time, what that will allow us to do is allow us to make a better case for volunteering not to be considered as a nice to have or as an add-on to services, but actually to be embedded in the design and the planning of services as a core component of that, because at the moment it just isn't. Um,
Mm.
and and for me, I think that there's a lack of understanding for people who are outside of volunteering about the complexity of it, about the complexity of infrastructure that's actually needed to be able to support volunteering to grow and to be sustainable. And
Mm.
and I sometimes feel as though I've worked in volunteering for 20 years now, and I sometimes feel that those people who are inside volunteering, we all get it, we all understand. But it's how do we reach those people outside of our sphere of volunteering and get them to understand and to buy in and to
Mm.
um, champion volunteering and kind of get the will kind of to build up. So, I mean, there isn't anything. I mean, everything resonates really well for me in Scotland, certainly within the health and social care area, and just really interested to see how we can be involved further in this moving forward.
Thank you, Janice. And I'm sure your comments resonate with a number of people on this call. But one of the things that challenge paper, when you get it, you will see is talking about how do you influence outside of the volunteering community?
Yeah,
How do you influence the key actors outside of that? And I think that is seen as a global challenge.
yeah,
But please stay with us because the global dialogues will continue right up through till at least the summer. And there will be other opportunities to engage and and it's great to have you on this call. Okay. So now
Wendy,
I'd like to Diane, I
Wendy,
think.
can I chime in here just to read out two comments that are we just heard a comment about like who is missed in the conversation about volunteering, and there's two comments in the chat that I think identify other groups that are missed. Alex says there is, I think, associated with enabling volunteering to make a difference, small to medium NGOs face significant obstacles in competing with larger NGOs to offer or scale their volunteer programs. This creates a chilling effect on innovation and reducing the impact of volunteerism overall. How can we better support small to medium NGOs or small community organizations and thus enable more innovation in the volunteerism space? There's that comment, and then I'll just read one more and I'll let you comment and move on, Wendy. But another comment is volunteering is actually important. However, its application is quite different in different parts of the continent or countries. I'm suggesting that the IYV, sorry, the IVY strategies should be narrowed to regional particularities. So a comment about small NGOs and a comment about the attention to regional and local needs.
Yeah, thank you. I saw both of those comments and I was thinking to myself that they really highlight two things. First of all, that where volunteering is concerned, context is really important. And that context could be the size of your organization. The context could be where your volunteering is taking place in what country, in what region of the world, in what community. So, and I think that variety and diversity is at the heart of volunteering, but it does provide a challenge when you're trying to make sure that everyone will benefit from a call to action. And I'm sure that challenge will percolate through the rest of this year as we have these conversations. So thank you for those comments. And now I'll hear from Diane.
Thank you, Wendy. My name is Diane Quest. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Points of Light in the US. And I don't have a question in particular. I just want to validate and say thank you for doing this work. We have just gone through a almost a year of strategic planning and really identified very similar, if not precisely the same needs and strategies for increasing volunteering in the US, which fell, of course, during the pandemic, and we've seen a small increase, but not a full rebound. And we've also seen over the years sort of an erosion of national leadership on volunteering, certainly from our government, but national leaders generally. And so we've been talking a lot about similar things. And Janice, we have the same phrase that volunteering isn't just nice, it's necessary. And so how can we change the perception of volunteering so that I think first and foremost for us, funders understand the urgency and the relevancy of getting more people engaged in volunteering, but also what are the other barriers and cultural mindsets that we can shift so that we do create more of an enabling environment all around for people to get involved in volunteering. And in the US, the other connection point that is really resonating with people is what our US Surgeon General identified as a loneliness epidemic, isolation. People feel disconnected of all generations, but especially younger generations. And the Surgeon General, as he's getting ready to depart with the change in the administration, has put in his prescription for America, one of the pieces is that people should get more involved in volunteering. So that is resonating a lot for us, and I offer that for other countries and regions where that may work as well as a way to talk about the value and impact of volunteering, not just on communities and in delivering critical services, but on individuals who volunteer as well. So thank you for this. It's amazing. We look forward to partnering with you in any way possible.
Thank you, thank you. And loneliness is one of the things that came out of the World Volunteer Conference in terms of in Busan in last October. And actually, IAVE is going to be running a webinar on that very theme, using some volunteer involving organizations research at the end of March, I believe. So I think you're right on the button there, Diane, in terms of it being a real one of those real issues that actually is global, that isn't just about the US, but actually is global. But I'm also delighted to hear that Points of Light feel that the things that we're talking about are relevant to you too in your work, and we look forward to working with you over this next year and all the organizations to see how we can get this global call for action really have ownership and can be really used positively for volunteering. So now I'd like to go to Petronella.
Yes, thank you so much for having us here today. And I'm really loving the conversation and I'm really learning a lot. On my side, I wanted to talk about the measure of contribution of volunteers. So I wanted to ask, are we having in place strategies to measure and assess the impact of informal volunteers' work? Because many a times the work that informal volunteers do goes unrecognized. And also I would like to know if we are looking at measuring the impact of volunteers that are never really highlighted, the likes of children. Are we looking at ways of measuring and assessing the impact of the work that volunteer children get?
Okay, well, the first thing is that, actually these webinars are showcasing, that people have a real interest in certain issues, and measuring volunteering is one of those. And I'll ask Lowell to put some information that IAVE holds on measuring volunteering, some links that you can find on the IAVE website so you can take a look at that. The whole issue of how we measure the impact of volunteers is challenging. It's difficult because volunteers are involved in so many different ways, and lots of organizations are looking at this. And I would encourage any organization on this particular webinar, if you do have information, to share it with each other, because that's one of the ways in which we can learn from the global volunteering family. For instance, I know that Points of Light will have looked at measurement of volunteering, I'm sure, more than once, and I may have something to share. But Lowell will put IAVE information into the chat, and you can take a look at that. In terms of the measuring of volunteering and measuring of children of volunteering and informal volunteering, I think what we're trying to say with these webinars is to try to find out what are the most important issues and how do we resolve those. So if measurement of volunteering is continuing to be a huge issue, then we need to find a way of looking at how we can change that. And so, for instance, I know in Europe that the European Volunteer Centre has created a database and is looking at its organisations that are members, creating a tool for them to see how they can measure volunteering. So there are things out there, and perhaps we need to look again at sharing that information with the wider IAVE network on measuring volunteering, and I will take that as an action point. In terms of measuring children as volunteers, I don't think there's anything that I know of per se in relation to that. There are studies that look at other things. So for instance, there was a study a few years ago by one of the universities in England, which looked at the refugee volunteering in refugee camps. And what they discovered was that there were a lot of young people, and it depends how you define young people and children, but in the UK, you're still a child until you're 18. So, young people in the refugee camps were the volunteers. They were the ones who were informally coming together and volunteering in that particular community. So there are pieces of work we'll have identified where young people and children are involved, but I don't think there is a global study per se in terms of children and measuring the impact of their volunteering. And partly that will be because how you classify a child is probably different in different parts of the world. But certainly we'll put in the chat some more information about measuring volunteering, and we note that it is a key issue. And I think it's a key issue in one of these previous webinars as well. So thank you for your comments. And now, Catherine, you've been very patient, Catherine.
Thank you, and thanks so much again for this opportunity. It's been very informative. So my question is about the corporate organization setting aside a budget for for CSR to support nonprofit partnerships for volunteering. And just for a little bit of background, I'm actually from the same organization as Alex, who's been making some great comments there. So our organization is called Acquaint. And we're based in the US and really in a pretty unique situation where technically we are a small nonprofit organization just based on our revenue and staff, but we can accommodate a lot of volunteers just because we have a tech platform. We've currently got volunteers in over 110 countries, so wide reach despite being small. And yeah, like Alex was saying, we recruit people from around the world to engage in global dialogues, to talk about important issues. And we actually have a really big goal in the year of volunteering to recruit 100,000 volunteers to have productive intercultural dialogues about the Sustainable Development Goals. So that's a little bit of background, and I think one thing we really want to learn more about is how to forge those connections with the CSR departments and the corporations. And I not just for the purposes of Acquaint, because we do want to recruit a lot of volunteers, but maybe just for NGOs in general, in particular small to medium NGOs, maybe you could talk a little bit about how IAVE suggests making those connections, or what resources or suggestions you offer for nonprofits in that situation who are trying to connect with the corporations and with those resources.
Okay. Well, thank you for your question. First of all, I think corporate volunteering is very important to IAVE. we're the only organization that has done any global research into corporate volunteering, and you should look at the website and look at that research, because that will provide you with some insights into corporate volunteering, and particularly where corporates are focusing and the trends in relation to corporate volunteering. And secondly, it also has a GCVC. We have a Global Corporate Volunteering Council, which is made up of members from global corporates. So not necessarily you need to have, your corporation needs to work in 2 or 3 regions of the world as opposed to just one country. So we do have quite a bit of insight into corporate volunteering and what are the trends in relation to that. I would say that IAVE, if you are interested in, talking to someone from IAVE about the corporate volunteering, then Lowell will give you the name of one of our staff members who deals with that, and you can connect with them directly. I do know that corporates have a real interest in, skills-based volunteering, and that might be one of the things that you could offer to them through your organization. But also, I think what we're clearly saying here as this call to action, often corporates see their corporate volunteering as they're in a family with other corporates. So corporate volunteering is a kind of, in a box. And what we're trying to do with the call to action is say, well, actually, you may have, you may have a small box, but actually there's a bigger box that is about the whole world of volunteering, and you're a part of that. And to try to make sure that corporates see that, corporate volunteering is part of the volunteering movement, an important part, and that corporates have a role to play, not only in supporting corporate volunteering, but perhaps in investing in a wider volunteering support. So making sure that the enabling environment for volunteering is met. And we're looking to see how we can influence corporate volunteering to see that and to encourage them to be part of these multi-sectoral coalitions and discussions that can see them help to invest in volunteering at a wider level than just corporate volunteering. So, and that's why we're involving corporates in this, and we'll be having dialogues with corporates as part of this call to action. And sometimes it is about encouraging them to see beyond corporate volunteering and see volunteering as a global movement. And hopefully we'll be able to push that dial a little bit further round. So I hope that answers your questions, but definitely Lowell will put in the chat Eva or Laurie's name, an email, and you can contact one of them if you're interested in IAVE's corporate volunteering. But I would encourage you to start with the information that is already on IAVE website, particularly that very, very good corporate volunteering research done only a few years ago, which does have regional as well as a global, information. It very well did the regional context for corporate volunteering, which is different, and then did the global piece as well. Okay, are there any other questions? Any other comments? Have I missed anything in the chat while I've been talking? No?
Wendy, I wonder if I can just read out this good comment from Bruno. It's important to have collective indicators and simple yet unified objectives that, while respecting local specificities, bring attention and efforts together toward common goals. It's either easier to communicate when pursuing a smaller, more focused group of objectives, perhaps even a single objective, as demonstrated during the pandemic, where this approach worked well. The SDGs are numerous and tend to disperse efforts. What is the unified banner of volunteerism worldwide? Would it be possible to focus on a specific impact? I believe this is a valuable reflection.
It's an interesting point there. I mean, I think the call to action will have to look at that. Whatever comes out of the call to action, we'll have to look at, well, it's all very well to have a call to action, but what does it actually mean? And what is the key objective, and how might we measure that? If we're calling it a call to action, how would we measure its impact? And we're not there yet. And hopefully all of these global dialogues will help us eventually to come out with something that is really useful to people. But I think it's really important that volunteering is seen as really, not just important to the SDGs, but important to communities wherever they are in the world. That importance of people being empowered to get involved. And when you talk to many of our African colleagues, they will say that across Africa, mutual aid is just something that people do. It's what neighborhoods do. It's what your neighbor does. And it's capturing that as much as it is capturing what people often think of as registering on a website and getting a volunteer opportunity. There's so much of a whole continuum of volunteering across the world, and it's seeing how we can raise awareness of all of that, which is really important. Well, in that case, you will have the opportunity to, reflect on what you've heard and, come back through other, workshops and, opportunities to engage in these conversations. This is not the last of this at all, and we're looking for people to continue to stay engaged with us. But really, if I can just briefly say about the next steps, the dialogues will continue until the summer of 2025. And we're also going to, as I said, have a global survey, which will go out. The dialogues will start to perhaps change a little. We did these 4 webinars, really just literally off the cuff, if you like, to start to test and tease out some issues. Once the challenge paper is published, once the researcher we've engaged has created the survey, we will be looking post-February to look at more online and more workshops regionally. So we do, I think there was a comment earlier, yes, about, context is really important here. So we'll be looking to do regional workshops to make sure that we're hearing from the regions what is the most important thing to them. And that might be different from Latin America to Africa to Europe. We understand that, and that's why we're going to be going regional as well as global, as well as national. We want to reach out as far as we can. And then we intend to bring all of that information together. And out of that, we will create an insights paper. And that insights paper will then inform the development of a call to action. And our aspiration is to have the call to action published in December 2025. So just before we enter IVY 2026, we want to have the call to action launched possibly on the 5th of December 2025 to enable us to be able to say, this is what the world of volunteering thinks is an important call to action. And then we want to roll out during 2026 endorsements and commitments, and working with key actors and stakeholders to see, okay, how are we going to make this call to action active? How are we going to activate it? We're calling it a call to action. So what are the actions that are required, and who is going to do them, and how are we going to be able to measure and look at the commitments that are going to be made? So we're going to be doing all of that, and then we hope to continue this work really through, if we can, to 2030, to the end of the decade. So not to see it end at the end of 2026, but to see that the future of volunteering is something which is kept in the minds of people right through to at least the end of the decade. So that is where we're hoping to go with it. It is a big vision, I know, but volunteering is a really, really important thing. And the hundreds of thousands and millions of volunteers across the world, deserve to be valued, recognized, and we deserve to get the investment for volunteering that is required to make our world a better place. It isn't as if the issues aren't there, because they are, and it isn't as if we need to make sure that there are always volunteers and individuals who are going to step forward to help the world become a better place for everyone. And I think that's what the call to action has at its heart. And we hope that you will stay with us, and that you will engage in everything that we send out to you, and keep talking to us about your reviews and comments, and stay with us right through to the end of this year and then into the international year. So thank you very much for your contributions at this webinar. And Lowell will be in touch with information for you, including the slide presentation. So thank you very much. Thank you.